The Electoral College.
Why does America run her elections this way? Instead of electing a president based on who gets the most votes overall, we elect our president based on who gets the most votes from different states. There are other people who can explain this process more thoroughly, but I just want to talk about why it's used. Well, the simple reason is that America is a republic and not a democracy.
We're not a democracy. We're a republic.
And they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy.
Because in a democracy, 51% of the people control 49% of the people. If you're part of the 49%, you're not free. America was founded as a constitutional republic.
And yeah, I totally agree. The US is a republic and not a democracy. If we were, 51% of people could vote to eat the other 49% of people, and we wouldn't want that.
Wasn't it Benjamin Franklin, to paraphrase, that said, democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner?
You have to have some basic guaranteed rights that protect every human and aren't dictated by majority rule. The Founding Fathers got that right. You know, eventually.
Oh, wait, never mind.
But we're getting off topic. Back to the Electoral College, does this still apply? I mean, in our elections, people are going to be voting to elect one of two people anyway. One could argue that's a bit different than hypothetically voting to bore someone for no reason.
Well, you know, the Founding Fathers may have created it to forestall any complications. But now a prominent Democratic lawmaker is calling for the end of the Electoral College.
Well, those are foolish people, at least in this respect. And so it's a shame that Donald Trump didn't get the popular vote. But think what it would be, what a shame it would be if the president could be elected from 10 pockets of population. They'd be like capitals, maybe like in the Hunger Games, and the rest of us would be like colonies, right? So it matters where people live in America, and the whole country gets represented.
Well, that about says it. You don't just want California and New York deciding the election every time, do you? Why do different states have unique state flags? Each state is unique and has its own priorities and goals. The Electoral College was set up to give each state a voice. You have to look at the US like 50 different countries. Is something I heard in a few different talk radio shows. Rush Limbaugh, Joe Pags, one of them, I'm sure. But they're right. We do want to make sure that all the states are represented, and not just the ones with the densest population.
You can clearly see how much more red there is. The majority of the country clearly identifies with one candidate over the other.
Remember, he's the President of the United States, not the United People. Instead of something crazy like a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we need to make sure all the diverse stretches of land are represented. You may have heard the factoid that because of the Electoral College, a vote in Wyoming is worth 3.5 times more than a vote in California. This is true, and that's the reason why. We're pretty sure that most of the people in California want the same thing, so okay, their opinion's represented, that viewpoint is noted. But even though it is more popular in terms of actual humans, we don't want it to drown out the voices in less populated areas. Their vote should carry enough weight to make a difference. Honestly, I don't think the Founding Fathers took it far enough. I mean, it's understandable considering more than half the country didn't exist at the time, but let's take a look at the country today. For example, in the recent 2016 election, Hillary won Nevada, but let's take a closer look. Oh my, look at all that red and those tiny pockets of blue. We don't want elections decided in Nevada just because Reno and Las Vegas are the most populous cities. We should limit the power of votes in Clark and Washoe County because they ignore the will of the rest of the state. I mean, why else would we have borders and different county flags? You have to treat the counties like 16 tiny countries and give them all a say. They're all unique and have their own goals and priorities. We shouldn't be drowned out simply because there are less people living here. And, of course, that would be ridiculous. Nevada is a desert and almost no one lives in the red areas.
If you live in one of the red areas, I'm sorry, I still love you.
Using that kind of logic, you could justify limiting the vote of a small town because they ignore the will of the hermit that lives in the outskirts. But wait, I hear you say, and before you continue, yes, I agree, that does not mean that dense cities are the only places that matter. I mean, you also have to understand, I'm not saying the lower population states are all just backwards mountain towns filled with country bumpkins, so their opinion isn't important.
If you're a country bumpkin that lives in a backwards mountain town, I'm very sorry. I still love you.
One reason some states have lower populations is because so much of it is farmland. There just can't be as many expansive cities. So, yeah, as a result, there's just not as many people living there, and that means not as many people to vote. And that's really not anyone's fault. Hey! Did you ever notice how there's less minorities in the country, so their views don't get represented as much either? You know, 'cause there's less of them? Maybe black people could get some extra votes to even things out. I'm some variety of incredibly gay. Can I have a couple extra votes so I don't get sent off to Mike Pence's gulags? The argument goes, if there's no electoral college, then elections are decided by urban areas. If winning urban votes is all that matters, then candidates will only campaign in big cities and appeal to their interests and completely ignore rural areas. And you're not wrong to be concerned, but this argument also has some problems. First, the Electoral College does not guarantee that flyover states get attention. Here's another election map, similar to the one you saw earlier. This is the minimum amount of counties you'd need to win an election. Each of those counties are large enough that they'd win the state. And this is still with the Electoral College. They still wouldn't need a single vote from the majority of states. Now, obviously, this specific scenario is not realistic, the Republicans losing Texas and the Democrats losing Washington. I mean, Washington is one of the only states that would still go blue if only white guys voted. But the fact that this is even theoretically possible is concerning. Or, at the very least, it makes this less concerning. More about that later. There's this other video on YouTube defending the Electoral College by Mark Kay. You know, this guy.
All that aside, there's really only one thing you need to know about the Electoral College. If you take away only one thing from this entire video, this should be it. People who really want to change the Electoral College are usually the ones who lost it.
The French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence.
But what I really wanted to showcase was part of this great comment left by Mr. William Joel on that video. Countless flyover states already get zero attention at all. There were no campaign events at all in Wyoming, Kansas, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, West Virginia, etc. during the general election. There were also no rallies in California, where 18% of the people live. Big cities like New York get ignored, but big cities like Philly do get attention, because the system empowers or disempowers citizens based on where they live arbitrarily. Now listen. If the Florida Panhandle were part of Alabama and Mississippi, like it almost was, and if the Michigan Upper Peninsula were part of Wisconsin, like it almost was, Clinton would have won without changing a single vote. Oh wait, after making that graphic I found out that you could move the borders even less and still make that difference. Anyway. And that's just changing close borders. That's not coastal elites being out of touch with middle America. The middle of the country isn't made more relevant by the Electoral College. Florida is, along with a couple others. So, ironic he makes reference to Miami high-rises when the Electoral College basically makes Florida the most important state in the country.
And someone who appeals to the high-rise condo dwellers of LA and New York and Miami just doesn't appeal to the farmers and steel workers in the Midwest.
Second, a national popular vote system wouldn't actually guarantee that the biggest states are the ones that decide the election. Back to this map one more time. It is still an accurate map. Half the population does live in the blue areas, but are you seeing how it implies your choice wouldn't be represented if the blue counties voted against you?
This concern is based on the politically unrealistic assumption that a candidate would get 100% of the popular vote in all 146 of the biggest counties, and therefore not need any votes from any of the country's remaining counties. In fact, the total vote in these heavily populated counties is only 59% Democratic. Anyone sharing Stephen Fleming's concern should be even more concerned about the current state-by-state winner-take-all system.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things I really don't like about the election map we see every 4 years. Not only is it not representative of the electoral votes, it also gives the impression that states are either or. The fact is, the US is pretty purple all around. Something else to consider is, since 1900, we've had 15 elections where a Republican candidate won the presidency. Of those 15, they only lost the popular vote 2 times, meaning, they were able to get the majority of people to vote for them 13 other times. Now, of course, political parties and public opinion changes as time goes on. I'm not going to try and argue that nothing has changed since the 1900s. But it's not like the Electoral College is the only thing protecting us from a one-party country. Put another way, if it were true that a certain political party couldn't ever be elected without government assistance, should they ever really be in power? Number 3. The Electoral College disenfranchises people, and this is the important one, at least to me. If you aren't already, I want you to imagine being a US citizen and living in a state that is either heavily Republican or heavily Democrat, like Idaho or Vermont. No matter what party you support, you really don't have to vote in the general election. Oh gosh, I hope not too many people watch this video. I'm fairly certain that no matter how many people watch this video, it's not going to change the trends. Idaho will still go red and Vermont will still go blue. As mentioned earlier, that's why candidates don't tend to campaign in these states. It's not like campaigning there would change anything. But, as an individual voter, you also can't change anything, not without massive organizing efforts. If you're a Republican in Idaho, well, Idaho's gonna go red anyway. No matter how many extra Republicans vote, it will not get the Don a single extra electoral college vote. You can only get those 4 from Idaho max. Why expend the effort, right? May as well stay home. If you're a Republican in Vermont, same thing. There's no way you're gonna get the majority vote, and since it's winner take all, she'll get those 3 votes either way. You might as well stay home too. Again, do you know how bad turnout is in this country in general? It's pretty bad when compared to other countries. This election cycle wasn't as bad for us as it was in 2000, it was around 57%, but that's still 43% of voting age citizens unaccounted for. Now, I'd like you to imagine a US where the elections are decided by the popular vote. As a result of those organizing efforts I mentioned, Texas was closer to going blue in 2016 than it was in 2012. But, because Clinton didn't win the majority, all that improvement was ignored, and it didn't make any difference in terms of the electoral votes. Donald still got all of Texas's 38 electors. If the election was decided by national popular vote, or if the electoral votes were distributed proportionally, it could have been a game changer. Imagine that. Now instead of your 32% in Vermont doing nothing, it contributes to the national total. And that's 32% today, but imagine how many people would get out to vote if they knew it mattered, even if they didn't win the whole state. People would get more involved in the political process than ever because now, no matter where you live, every little bit helps. At the time of writing, 3 weeks out from the election, the current count is that Hillary Clinton leads the popular vote by over 2 million people. Even though that many more voters wanted Hillary to be president, or at least wanted to avoid a Trump presidency, she lost because of the Electoral College. And, you know, that's fair, rules are rules, I'm not gonna blame Trump for that. Don't hate the player, hate the game, as they say. In 2012, Donald did his fair share of game hating, calling the Electoral College a disaster for democracy.
Constitutional Republic!
When it looked like Obama lost the popular vote. He ended up winning both that and the Electoral College, but as usual, Trump backtracked on those comments as soon as it became convenient for him.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to change my mind just because I won, but I would rather see it where you went with simple votes. You know, you get 100 million votes and somebody else gets 90 million votes and you win. There's a reason for doing this because it brings all the states into play.
Oh, alright then. Now, of course, Donald's excuse for losing the popular vote is that he respects the system as it exists currently, so he campaigns strategically in swing states. But if he needed to, he would have just campaigned more in New York and Florida and still totally would have won. Okay. The fact remains that the president that won because of the Electoral College would rather us not use the Electoral College, and I fully support him on that. And if you're someone who supported Trump through everything so far, I feel like you can't not support him here as well. Hey, thanks for watching. There are links in the description for most of the things I talked about in this video. As a fun note, if you're interested in how the states got their shapes, you should watch How the States Got Their Shapes. It's a great show. It used to be on Netflix, but it's not there anymore, so I don't know where else to watch it. Also, I highly recommend checking out the National Popular Vote channel for more videos on this subject. They've got a lot of content, but like, no views. They're very dense, but also very thorough, so check them out. This is my first time making a video or anything like this, so if you'd like to, let me know what you think. I'd really appreciate it.